This video is going to be about Dr. James Barry. If you're worried about me misgendering or dead naming, it is not going to happen. The rest of this video is a script. I've never done a video like this before, but I have high hopes. I guess I can start with hi my friends, my name is Francis, I use they them pronouns, and I'm glad you found my channel. Historians often have difficulty knowing how to refer to historical gender nonconformists. There is much discussion on this, which I am not the best person to explain. Mainly, lack of terminology throughout history, as well as far-reaching reasons for cross-dressing, makes it difficult in most cases to determine what pronouns and labels a person might use for themselves if they were in the modern day. When it comes to Dr. James Barry, however, to me and many others, it's clear that he lived as a man for a majority of his life, and that's how he enjoyed living. James Barry was born in Ireland around 1789 or 1790, and his family ran a grocery store. There's speculation that as a teenager, Barry had been assaulted and gave birth to a baby girl, who was then raised by his mother as his sister. Details of his early life are shuffled, and I had a hard time coming to a solid conclusion. I did my best in this is off script. I did my best in this video to find as many details as I could about his life, but I am still, again, very new to this type of content, so there very well might have been something I missed or something that I misunderstood. So if that happens, please tell me so that I can address that in the comments and be better in the future. Details of his early life are shuffled, and I had a hard time coming to a solid conclusion. But it appears him and his mother were, at least temporarily, kicked out of his father's house. So him and his mother went to his uncle, James Barry, a royal painter and academic, and met some of his friends who recognized James for his intelligence. The James of our story, not the Uncle James Barry. Those friends were Francisco de Miranda and David Stewart Erskine. Notably, James' full preferred name seems to have been James Miranda Stewart Barry, which I just think is cute. Francisco de Miranda, David Stewart, and then, James Miranda Stewart Barry. It's just, I think it's cute. I like when people choose their names to honor people that they love. There is speculation that this would be a crucial moment in James' transition and pursuing an education. His older brother and or father, unclear, seems to have bankrupted his family in 1806, ending up in prison. That same year, his uncle James Barry passed away, leaving his family with a large inheritance. He hated the gender rules that he was expected to live under. When he was 18, he had chastised his brother, "Were I not a girl, I would be a soldier," because his brother was like a delinquent or something, I don't know. Again, unclear details of early life. In 1809, when he was 19 years old, he and his mother he and his brother he and his mother moved to Edinburgh. I don't know if that's right, how you say that, which was the place for anyone wanting to study medicine. When he moved, he started going by his uncle's name and claimed to be his uncle and his mom's nephew. He enrolled in medical school under the name James Barry. The last mention of his previous name in historical records was a letter he himself had written shortly after establishing his new life, which I just think is cool. Like, the idea of, I don't know what the letter said or anything, but I'm entirely projecting onto this man. I really like the idea of like writing yourself a letter and then just, that's the end. That's the end of that part of me. We're moving on to this part. I think that's really a beautiful idea. I'm not sure what the letter said, but I think that's a really nice idea. James wore an overcoat and oversized clothes, no matter what the weather was. He also wore 3-inch shoe inserts. He was known for loving flamboyant clothes and stylish wigs. He also was known to carry a rapier. He pretended to be younger to account for his boyish looks, and people made up rumors, not that he was trans, but that he was a child. He wasn't allowed to sit in for his exams because they thought he was a child. When either his uncle's friend David Stewart Erskine or Lord Buchan intervened. Somebody intervened and saved his butt, and that was a theme for throughout his life. Thankfully, he had those connections that were able to let him live his best life. He received his medical degree at 22 and enlisted in the Army as an assistant surgeon. I feel like, okay, I'm gonna get better with presentation. I'm so self-conscious of what I'm doing right now. He received his medical degree at 22 and enlisted in the Army as an assistant surgeon. They again questioned his age, but allowed him to serve. When he was 23 in 1813, he began serving in a military hospital as an assistant, before quickly being promoted to staff surgeon, which was the equivalent to being a lieutenant. He served in Cape Town, South Africa for 10 years, where he got close to Lord Charles Somerset. He moved into a private apartment in Charles's residence. Some believe that Charles knew James's secret. When he was 34 in 1824, someone unknown put a sign on the town bridge that said Lord Charles had been caught buggering Dr. Barry, meaning that they had accused them of having homosexual relations, which could carry with it the death penalty. The scandal was investigated and both were exonerated, however, both were deeply humiliated. James described Somerset as my more than father, my almost only friend. I added that quote in because, I don't know, I don't think that every relationship is inherently sexual, but it's also impossible to really tell. And I don't want to assume that he had a sexual relationship with Somerset, but also I don't want to assume that he didn't. I just wanted to provide two angles. If he was a trans gay man, more power to him, you know? And if he was just having a really close platonic bond with Somerset, more to him, you know? I don't know what his relationship with Somerset is, and I don't want to speculate. I also don't want to potentially erase that he was a gay man if he was. That's the theory that some people hold. I'm not going to speculate. I wanted to address that. June of that same year, he performed the first successful C-section in the British Empire in which both mother and child lived. He was known to be unprecedentedly skilled as a surgeon. James was a short-tempered and sometimes violent man, described as bombastic, opinionated, and tactless. He had a reputation for swearing and insulting people who didn't agree with his ideas for reform. He'd thrown medicine bottles, participated in a duel, and yelled at Florence Nightingale for only wearing a cap in the sun, and was generally on her bad side. He angrily defended himself every time his high voice or feminine features were commented on, and he went off on patients, superiors, army captains, anyone. However, he is also said to have had excellent bedside manners, which I kind of like picture him as like the Gordon Ramsay of medicine. You know how like Gordon Ramsay is like really angry, but it's like justified that he's really angry because like people's health and wellness is at stake here. But then like with kids or cool people or people who are crying, like some people who are crying, Gordon Ramsay is like very like heart to heart, like hey, we're okay. That's how I imagine James is, but I'm again speculating and projecting onto this historical figure. But that I just wanted to say that. He was harshly outspoken about medical concerns and practices. He fought passionately for better sanitation and water systems and complained about mismanagement of barracks. While stationed in Canada, he demanded improvements in living conditions and rations for soldiers, also demanding that they have access to libraries and recreations. He also throughout his life advocated for the health and well-being of prisoners, asylum patients, prostitutes, and lepers. He treated the rich, the poor, the colonist, the slave, white folk, black folk. He treated anyone and everyone. He was sober. He didn't drink alcohol. He was also a vegetarian. And he was said to be very popular with the ladies. He traveled with a milk goat and throughout his life had several dogs named Psyche. I love the little details of this man's life. I wish that I had just so many little details of this man's life. In 1828, James was posted in Mauritius, where he went on leave to care for Charles, who had fallen ill. He cared for Charles for 3 years before he passed. James was then sent to Jamaica, and then in 1836 to St. Helena, where he butted heads with another army surgeon and was arrested and court-martialed. He was found not guilty. He continued fighting for sanitation, better food, and proper medical care for prisoners and lepers, as well as soldiers and their families. In 1846, after coming back from medical leave for hay fever, James got in trouble for sitting in a clergy seat at a church. He was formally reprimanded, but he was far more concerned with the threat of a cholera outbreak. The outbreak did happen, and he worked to treat it, but then was restationed in 1851 when he was around 61 years old. Um, there's a lot of little details about him moving from this country to this country. I didn't get all of those, especially because it was really hard to keep a timeline to begin with. Hopefully I got most of it. I tried to pick out more so events than, oh, he was in Meritus. He was this place this year, this place that year, this place that. That was less my concern than trying to talk about his accomplishments and the events of his life. He asked to be stationed in Crimea. When his request was denied, he took a leave and went to Crimea anyway, where he offended Florence Nightingale while on horseback. She called him the most hardened creature she had ever met throughout the army. 8 years later, James had returned to England, where he was forced to retire. He lived the rest of his life quietly with his poodle and his only servant, John Joseph Danson, who people speculate he may have had some form of relationship with. He was not given knighthood after his retirement. His arrests and altercations overshadowed his impressive reputation and skill. 6 years later, on July 25th, 1865, Dr. James Barry died of dysentery. His last wishes were strict prevention of anyone from examining his body. He asked to be buried in his bedsheets without further inspection. He asked to not be washed and to be directly buried. But his wishes were not followed. That's how I feel too, dog. The nurse found him to have been assigned female at birth and also could tell that he had stretch marks. Letters about this between the General Register Office and James's doctor, Major McKinnon, were leaked. His doctor, Major McKinnon, had signed the death certificate saying it was none of my business about James' gender. McKinnon had written off on the death certificate that James Barry was male. The nurse allegedly attempted to blackmail McKinnon. However, McKinnon didn't really care, saying that he had always thought that Barry was intersex. The nurse outed James Barry post-mortem to the press. When he died, acquaintances gossiped and goggled over his secret, and then claimed they always knew. In reality, no one had ever guessed it. Likely, he had close allies who did know. Florence Nightingale had responded, essentially saying that she didn't care what he was, she still hated him. Most articles I found while researching still refer to Barry by his dead name and with she/her pronouns, calling him a woman. For 55 some years, he lived as a man, used he/him pronouns, and signed his letters as a gentleman. But so many articles refer to him as this woman who tricked everyone. The very fact that he had expressly asked for his body to not be examined makes it clear to me. He never wanted to be outed. In his thesis in med school, he had wrote, "Do not consider whether what I say is a young man speaking, but whether my discussion with you is that of a man of understanding." The British Army sealed all records of Barry for 100 years, and they never published any obituary. In the 1950s, Isabel Ray gained access to the records. His headstone does say Dr. James Barry. I fully believe James Barry was an extraordinary, crass trans man that knew exactly what he wanted in the world and did a great many good things. I thank you very much for sitting through this video and listening to the story of this amazing man. If there is anything that you would like to correct me on in the comments, feel free to just drop it down there. I don't get many comments, so I will probably see it. If you have any critiques on how I could have done this sort of video better, please leave those also. Trans people exist. We have always existed, and we are always going to exist. You can't get rid of us. We aren't a genetic condition. We aren't anything of the sort. We are a people group who just is. I really appreciate you sticking around for this video. And yeah, however YouTubers say it, goodbye. He enrolled in medical school. He enrolled in medical. He enrolled in medical. Sorry.